It is often said that it takes 10,000 hours to master something. Everyone now seems to have heard of this rule, and generally, it's a pretty good barometer for mastering a skill. If you look at 11-year-old violin prodigies and the like, you'll still arrive at 10,000 hours, at as many as 4 to 5 hours of practice a day, every day for 6 or 7 years. It goes without saying then that the people who do master something at an early age are essentially exceptions and are probably dedicating most of their free time to that single activity. And that is likely true, but that doesn't mean that you can't become good or even masterful at something by dedicating much less time and starting later in life. Now here's the reality. Everyone who ever got good at anything did basically 3 things. First, they started. They just started. Second, they started terrible. And in relative terms, every expert was at one point really, really bad. And third, they trudged persistently through being really terrible to become masterful over many, many hours and many repetitions. So what does this mean for people like you and me? You have a full-time job, or maybe you even work multiple jobs. Maybe you've got kids or pets or a family to take care of. And you're fitting a few hours a week of exercise into your schedule, which good for you. But let me ask you this. How many hours a week do you spend not improving a skill? This includes just general browsing of the internet, spending time on social networks like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, most of Tumblr, and a lot of Reddit, assuming, of course, that you aren't using social networks for specific and effortful marketing of yourself or your business or your brand in some manner. This is probably wasted time. This includes time spent watching TV that's designed for entertainment, which is nearly everything on TV except for documentaries. And even some documentaries are obviously just kind of there for entertainment. Now, of course, nearly all forms of gaming are also included in this. I enjoy a lot of these things as well, but how many hours do you spend? How many hours a week do I spend in those areas? So think about it. Think about how many hours a week you spend in those areas, watching TV and browsing the internet and playing video games. Now, imagine spending about 45 minutes a day less doing those things. I know for myself personally, it's almost a guilty pleasure at this point. I easily spend over an hour a day just messing around on Reddit. I enjoy it. Quite often I do learn from it, but I'm in no way developing a skill, basically under any circumstance. I am occasionally learning from it, but not developing a skill. It's generally just kind of mindless and amusing. There is some value in that, undeniably some value in that, but I bring this up because I personally do my best to never complain that I don't have time to do something. I try to never say the sentence, I don't do that because I don't have time, or I haven't done that because I didn't have the time. If I prioritize something as important or valuable to me, I can probably make time. And I know that because it would be super easy and pretty inconsequential for me to cut out 45 minutes of the day that I spend just browsing the web. So that's where I get to the rule of 5 hours a week. If you spend 5 hours a week effortfully working on something, it amounts to 20 hours a month developing a skill. Imagine if at work, you have one colleague and you're on a team, but you're also in direct competition with this individual for performance, promotions, and raises, and so on. If you and your colleague both show up at 9 a.m. every day, and you both leave at 5 p.m. every day, and neither of you brings work home, and you're both working about the same amount, now imagine though instead that you get in at 8 a.m. every single day instead of 9. Every 2 months, you have a full work week's edge, a 40-hour lead over your colleague. So that means every 12 months, you're essentially lapping your colleague, or in this case, your competition, by an extra month and a half. You added a month and a half of effortful, work-related skill development. All because maybe you slept an hour earlier instead of playing video games before bed, which I'm guilty of that pretty much all the time. But of course, look, you can be getting up an hour earlier, 5 days a week, to read articles related to your work or practice and acquire new skills related to your work, such as maybe learning new tricks in Excel, developing a new understanding of a coding language, or whatever that might be. And these are just white-collar desk job examples, but this can undoubtedly prove useful in any other physical or blue-collar work. Imagine that you're getting in an hour earlier to your shift to experiment with new approaches to speeding up your work. Or maybe you ask your manager or a more experienced coworker of yours if you can lead another project on the side. Prepare things for the day ahead of time, or maybe you shadow them to see what they do differently that others don't, to really determine, hey, how did that person get into a management position over other people? You don't have to necessarily find that time either. You can get creative. You can get efficient. I like to listen to audiobooks and podcasts about personal finance, investing, sales methodologies, psychology, sociology, marketing. I listen to a lot of these books and these podcasts on my commute. I spend about an hour and a half every day, I would say, every work day, in the car. So I can read a book at the pace of about 2 a month without actually having to make any type of change to my schedule. I don't have to go to a bookstore and purchase a book and find time to actually read it and read it at night before bed. This is time that I'm already spending. I have to be in the car to get to and from my job. So I just spend that time learning. I know some people like to do the same sort of thing while they're exercising. I don't personally, but if you do this while you're driving and exercising, this might add 3 or 4 hours of effortful learning of something each day. So it's not always about just offsetting that time. You can actually find ways to kill 2 birds with 1 stone a lot of the time. And of course, offsetting or layering this time from other activities to develop a skill is something that can be applied to any extracurricular skill as well. Imagine how much more fit and strong you would be if you would just trade 45 minutes a day of browsing Facebook for 45 minutes a day on a run, or doing push-ups and pull-ups, or going to the gym to lift weights, or joining a 90-minute Pilates class 3 days a week. If you don't play any instruments but you've always wished that you could, what's stopping you? Start now. Start today. There are so many resources out there to learn a huge range of skills, and many times at very low buy-in. Practice for an hour a day, 5 hours of the week, instead of sitting in front of the computer watching YouTube videos. Just that level of commitment will get you to 2,600 hours of practice by the time 10 years pass. And no, that's not enough time. That's not the 10,000 hour rule. That's not enough time to become truly world class or elite or masterful at that instrument or that skill. But I promise you that it's enough to be considered very good by most standards. You'll be beyond good enough to play with other musicians in a band, to record your own music. For a vast majority of people, that's more than enough to feel a sense of self-efficacy in that skill. In fact, I would make the argument that at about 1,000 hours, a typical practitioner graduates from beginner to that early intermediate type of level. In general, intermediate level skill will appear recognizably practiced and superior to no or beginner level skill in just about any undertaking that you choose. And remember, that 10,000 hours is the level for absolute mastery. It takes about 10 years of consistent, effortful practice to reach that level under most circumstances. And it's admittedly really difficult to do in more than 1 or 2 things at a time, just due to time constraints, of course. But again, we're talking about mastery. This is a black belt. Borderline elites. You're talking the best in the world in that particular skill. So keep in mind, to go another level deeper, to be elite among the elite, if you're looking like at Olympic athletes, that probably requires at least another 10,000 hours once you've become a master. 31-year-old American Olympic swimmer Michael Phelps started swimming at age 7. And at the time, he was actually afraid to put his face in the water. But he did what every master did at one point. He started and he was awful. Terrible. Couldn't put his face in the water. Today, though, Phelps trains 5 to 6 hours a day, 6 days a week, which means he's clocking in 10,000 hours about every 5 years. Again, we're talking a legendary swimmer with 23 Olympic gold medals, and undoubtedly he has some natural genetic advantages that really pertain to that particular skill. But the point here is, if you want to be masterful or elite at a skill, you have to understand the commitment that it takes. For most people, it's going to be a stretch to achieve that level of mastery in a really short amount of time, in any short amount of time. But truly anybody can acquire a skill just by offsetting 5 hours of essentially unassigned time each week to developing that skill. And what I mean by unassigned, again, browsing Facebook or watching TV, that's unassigned time that you're not spending developing a skill. Just offset 5 of those hours a week. And of course, dedicating even more time to a single skill will proportionately speed up acquisition and mastery of that skill. But again, Assess yourself, assess your priorities. If there's something you want to do and you're not actively going after it, figure out where you're spending 45 minutes each day. Assign that time to practice. It will literally be a matter of weeks before you start to see noticeable advances in your skill. A matter of months before you develop some fluency. And who knows, maybe as you improve, you find that you're really passionate about that pursuit and you really decide you're going to dedicate more of your time, more of your free time, more of your unassigned time, and maybe some of your assigned time as well to developing that particular skill. But again, all it takes is to start. You're going to be terrible, but start today and start with just dedicating 5 hours a week.